Today, we wanted to talk about, or I wanted to talk about, I thankfully get to choose the topics here every week, but talk about the title to the show a little bit more about honesty. And for a very, very frank reason, is that I don't think people are honest enough. In general, throughout all of our lives, honesty is one of the things that we are most afraid of in so many different ways. And there's many, many different facets to how that works, and different ways that we lie to others, and to ourselves, and different reasons that we do that. I think that radical honesty, the ability to be honest about things, not hurtful about things, not malicious about the way you're saying them or what is being said, but the ability to be honest about who you are, what you think, and what you have done is something that if everybody could embrace and everybody could really work on, the world in general would be a significantly better place. So, as I said before, this is inspiring honesty, and that is our goal today, is to inspire honesty in other people and in ourselves across the board. So with that, I'd like to bring in my wonderful co-host, Mr. Bob Graves, the unconventional pastor. How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing pretty good, to be honest with you. It's been a busy week, though. We're finishing up uh, at school, and between that and also graduations for other people that we know, we've been running around like our heads were cut off. But it's been a great week.
That's a fun little nuance there in the to be honest with you, as far when I asked how you doing, because that's one of those realms where people are frankly not honest most of the time, and for good reason. It's a social nicety in many situations, especially when you run into somebody you haven't seen in a while. Hey, how's it going? You don't want to necessarily hear, well, my kids are really wearing me down. I'm getting really tired. I hate my job. Um, I'm struggling financially. I mean, somebody could throw out a whole myriad of problems, and you're like, man, you're an acquaintance. I barely know you. I feel like now I'm responsible to be
Yes.
your counselor or
Very true.
something.
Yeah.
So there is certainly uh, a realm of I guess social barriers in there. But how often are we honest with the people that would want to know that, and that would want to be there for us in those situations? This comes to mind specifically for me because I learned just last week that one of my very, very good friends, and actually it's happened now twice. I've had two different very good friends that have had this exact thing go on. Declared bankruptcy because of struggling so severely with their finances, and I had no idea until after it had happened. And at least for one of those, there might have been more we could have done to help. That this is a friend who is as close to me as a brother, and one of the biggest burdens for them was their car. They had a car loan that they couldn't afford anymore, and it became too much. And we could have just bought their car from them. It was a decent car. So we could have solved that problem, and it was a pride issue in the end that they would
It's a
rather.
it's a shame issue too. I mean, we live in a society, don't you think, where being that transparent is risky. And I'm a person who, to be honest with you, I believe that honesty is a calculated risk, and I don't believe that people are entitled to honesty if they demonstrate themselves to be people with whom you can't risk it. And uh, so there's a sense in which honesty is the fruit of a relationship that possesses integrity. And uh, you know that may seem like a strange thing to say, but I think that when it comes down to it, that's the policy we really have. We may say honesty is the best policy, but we really subscribe to a slightly modified policy, and I think that there's a sense in which there's times when we should. I don't know who out there would hold certain things against me unfairly, uh, and as a result, therefore, I don't think that it's their right to know. things that they would hold against me if I were just being totally transparent. Sometimes you don't know who those people are. And so I can see the hesitation. I could even say I think it's responsible to recognize that information that could be used against you is information that you know you you need to be careful with.
That's true, but we also need to recognize what that information contains. And the reason that I bring that up specifically is because there's plenty of situations where information could be used against you. It could be very detrimental in the situation, but in keeping it um, to ourselves and being quiet about it, in many ways, it can lead to an increased um, detriment to the situation. I don't know the best wording to say that, but the way I see it is often the fear that we have of the consequences of our honesty are much worse than what the actual consequences would be.
Very often. Yes.
Now, of course, there are situations where we underestimate as well. I know everybody has had at least one of those experiences. Otherwise, I don't think we'd be so fearful of it. But it's to me, I don't know. It seems like a risk that is worth taking more often than people do.
No doubt, no doubt. And I think there's also a sense in which you have to have, y- you know, s- addiction and other real serious problems thrive when there's secrets. You know, and I really think that we all need to have relationships with people where we can truly be who we are, truly share our concerns, our worries, the things that we're not sure about, the things we don't even like about ourselves, and you know things like that. It's helpful to have those kinds of relationships where we can have that kind of honesty, and and not everybody's entitled to that, only because we do live in a world where anything you do say can and will be held against you.
But I think that there's also something to be said with what you're talking about is a descriptive understanding of the society that we live in. And I guess what I'm advocating for is a proscriptive, what it could be.
Mhm.
If some people are willing to take that risk and take those steps, and it's something that I believe happens precipitously, that the more honest we are with other people, the more comfortable they are being honest with us.
True,
Some
true.
people may not like it. There's some things that people simply don't want to hear. I remember very, uh, very intimately losing a very close friend of mine for a long period of time. We've certainly repaired our friendship, but because I was honest enough to tell him that I didn't feel that the court ordered rehab program that he went into was unfair or that he was being persecuted or anything of or any of the multiple excuses that he came from. I thought that the problem he had was a severe alcoholism and a penchant for driving when you're drunk.
Yikes.
And I was concerned enough for him to tell him that no, I won't drink with him, and no, I won't uh, drop or pick him up from rehab and bring him to a party. But that his friends, some of his other friends, weren't quite so concerned with that, and yeah, it was certainly there were consequences to being honest with him there. But now, years later, as he's come to understand this a little better, he no longer associates with the other people who were bad for him, and him and I are closer than we ever were.
That's great. That's wonderful. It shows that the payoff isn't always immediate, and and the consequences aren't always permanent. Yes, and it's not an easy thing to call, but there's some things where it's one thing for me to not be sure how somebody might use information inappropriately against me. There's also the situation where people are entitled to certain information, and then there's also the inappropriate fear that somebody's going to use something to thwart my inappropriate agenda. you know, so
That's
it
very
gets
true. It is much easier to maintain a gambling problem or a drinking problem if nobody knows you have it. That keeping
Right.
secrets, or even to continue cheating on a spouse or anything of those lines. Um, if
Don't
nobody knows you're
think
doing it.
most people don't really know what it takes to um, be loyal to another person. We sometimes think of loyalty to another person as being in agreement with them. Whereas I think that sometimes being loyal to someone else means being able to do like what you did there, to stand up to them when they're pushing themselves down the wrong road, when they're trying to force their round life into a square peg, and we tell them that's what they're doing. um, you know, I think that many times people just don't have an understanding what it is that people really need in terms of what really is supportive. Are we supporting their perspective, or are we supporting them? Are we supporting their best, what's in their best interests, or what's on their wish list? It can be different, and
You're
it's,
right.
and we
And
don't.
go ahead. You had more.
You were cutting out on me, so I couldn't tell what you're saying.
Oh, I had cut you off before you were finished with that thought. So, did you have anything else you were going to say there?
Just that it's an awkward thing to be in a situation where we have to make such judgments, but we do have to make such judgments, and I think in the end it's you know it's better to really have another person's best interests in mind, and you can learn that the honest truth that I don't want to face is far more my friend than I may realize.
That's a very good point. I think that also you hit on another one in there, that there is a true recognition of entitlement to information. We have a viewer who commented, "I love to challenge my friends and family about religion, but with coworkers, it's scary. That might make me a hypocrite, but it's the unfortunate reality." And I I don't know
I
if
don't
that
think
makes you a hypocrite.
I don't think
My
well,
comment on
there's
that
different
is that, oh,
contexts. The risks are different, and one has to assess those. And the truth is, we're each responsible for the options that exist in our lives. And although here's the problem: I can be manipulative, or I can be genuinely careful. And the behavior that is involved in either of those is not so easy to discern. And so I can fudge even to myself if I'm not going to be honest with me. And that's the problem with things like love, and why we have things like law, because laws are easier to make explicit. Um, Love is in many ways open ended, and therefore subject to being faked.
I guess what I wanted to say on that is that the I on the question of entitlement, is somebody entitled to have this information about you? We certainly need to look into the circumstances that the person commenting here. It could be. I mean, they're specifically talking about religion. Love to challenge my friends and family about religion, but with coworkers, it's scary. Well, that is a perfectly prudent and rational position to take, because your coworkers really don't have any sort of right how you feel about religion, or any, and you have no responsibility to share it to them. I mean, it's not related to your relationship in any way unless you mutually want it to, and therefore consequences to being honest in that certainly can go beyond, with
Dude,
some caveats there. If you
yeah,
are a minister, a preacher of some sort, if you work in any sort of faith-based organization where you are expected to have specific religious beliefs, then I guess the point I'm making, or the argument I'm making, is this is an honesty and an integrity issue, or it's a personal moral issue that I believe that integrity calls us to be honest in those situations, and a lot of people instead choose to react out of fear. And I know another example. I believe we talked about it just last week or the one before, of a practicing clergy member who could no longer, or I don't know if he was actually being dishonest, but he was being honest, and his congregation could no longer tolerate what he had to say and gave him the boot. Now, is that wrong on their part? No, I don't necessarily think so. It's not wrong on his part either. In
Yeah,
reality, he was
he's not
honest
a
about what
fit,
he thought, and he suffered the consequences for it.
right?
But I think he made the right decision.
Hmm.
It's uh,
He's not a
it's
proper
a very
fit for
real
that job.
situation.
Its days were numbered. You know, it really was. There's the possibility that, you know, if I say something that one of my relatives doesn't like, well, you know, there might be a few awkward holidays, might be some awkward moments, might be some bad moments. But if I offend somehow inadvertently a coworker, uh, it's not just that this could affect my job or my pay, you know, but if I have certain responsibilities to take care of my family, um, you know, I do think that because there's a potential for other people suffering as a result of payback to me or retribution to me, I think that that's why at work it's probably best to be a little more judicious in what you say. You know, I don't, but I'll tell you what, I don't want, uh, say, evangelical Christians or fundamentalist Christians. If I own a company, I don't want them there on the job treating it like a mission field and taking the captive audience that they have of other people who work there and using that as an opportunity to shove the gospel down their ears. You know, so there's a sense in which the purpose of the workplace possesses certain goals and agendas that have to do with the business at hand. And I don't think it's unwise to be careful about what one says in terms of revealing what they really think or feel about politics, religion, or other issues that people tend to get all, you know, buggered out of shape with.
But I mean, we're talking specifically about politics and religion here because that's what the commenter brought up. But let's say it's not related to some hot button issue that is completely outside of the realm of work, but instead there's a policy that you feel is an unfair policy, or an administrator that you feel is not um, performing as they should be, or any other thing that actually is related to the job. Maybe a new venture that you feel is a terrible idea, and you can make a good reasoned argument why. Is it best to just keep your mouth shut, be happy in the job that you're in, or to speak up? Obviously, following the proper channels, not just creating a rumor mill or anything, but to submit your idea in whatever way has been established, and at least get your thoughts out there. Should we be
I,
reacting in fear there?
I totally, I think that's your job. Yeah. To be, but there's ways of going about it, tactful and untactful. So by making a commitment to express that, learning how to be able to say things that are palatable, you know, learning how to do that. One of the things that I learned to do, and once I learned to do it, life became so much easier. Is, you know, I found better ways of letting people I'm answerable to understand I'm not going to take guff from them, but I'm not going to just, you know, shove it back in their face, you know. And it took me a while to learn how to do that well and to kind of stand up for myself. Just because I work for someone, I'm not, you know, I'm not their whipping boy or something. And you know, coming up with some of those attitudes helped me. And there have been a few times when I've ended up actually saying things to somebody I'm accountable to at work, where they understood that you know, I'm holding them to a standard in the way that they speak to me. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
I found that by doing that in a way where I'm demonstrating my intent is genuine respect for both of us, that by communicating that, I've actually improved the relationship I've had with the people that I answer to.
And that's, I guess, once again, what I'm advocating for is looking in that situation. And it's a great analogy. You brought up something that was relevant to the situation. You spoke your mind. You spoke it clearly. You spoke it decisively. You were not um, unduly rude, but at the same time, you didn't avoid saying what needed to be said in that situation. You were honest, well, tactful, and respectful. And that is rare form, unfortunately, in far too many situations here. Um,
I, can I tell you? There's one time. I don't want to get into too many details here. There's one time when I was actually sitting in a break room. It was break time, and I'm sitting in the break room, and one of the people who was higher up than me came into the break room and was angry at me for something that they felt I hadn't done well, and began, telling me so, and telling me what was going to happen, and what the, and is that clear? And then they left the break room. I called them back, and I said, "You came in here and you spoke to me in front of my peers. I guarantee you, you're not going to want to do that again, or I'll make sure you're not happy with the way that's going to work for you. I'm going to do the best job for you I can, and I apologize that if things weren't working the way you wanted to, but that's not going to happen again." The people there were kind of shocked, but I did have a good enough relationship with that person that they knew I'm the kind of a person who's not going to be that. And there've been a few other times when that person had gotten angry, and I was trying to communicate to him, I am not going to be the person you're going to vent that anger at, and that kind of shocked some of my fellow workers when they said that, "Hey, look, I'm not taking that." Know,
Bob, we have a comment here. I
time
thought
I did,
you might
yeah.
appreciate it. It says Bob is so ridiculously reasonable.
But in sense though, one of the things I'm saying is this: I had this is part of an ongoing relationship with this person where we've been able to work out a frankness and an honesty, so that this person already knew that when I stand up for myself, I'm not trying to be just a, "Hey, don't push me around, I'll push back," uh, but it rather just saying that, sorry, there's a line here with my dignity and my boundaries, and I don't care who you are, we're not crossing that. But so I think that on the job, that's a hard honesty to develop, but you have to really feel good about yourself to do that too.
I agree that it's very important to be confident, and self-esteem is crucial in those situations. You need to know that you are worth the job that you're in, or you deserve it. You're capable of it. So certainly, it is much harder to be honest in that respect when, if you're being honest with yourself, you deserved everything that came to you.
And
So
one of an odd thing that I noticed about that is there was a time when I would be far more intimidated to do that. I suppose in some ways it's just getting older, than and more mature as I just get older. But the odd thing is this: I found that the more I was really willing to do that, the less it ever became an issue where I had to, because once people realize that I have those lines, they don't cross them. And in fact, I found that it actually, if you see what I'm saying, that it's like the coward dies 1,000 deaths, the
the hero only
courageous
one.
person dies but once. And there's a sense in, oh, we're on the job. If you're afraid to say something, oh my gosh, you're gonna working is gonna be hell. You don't want to do that. You want to really find a way of being able to be honest about the job, honest about yourself, honest about your useful and meaningful perceptions.
So there's a couple other realms of honesty that I wanted to get into. One, I mean, the workplace one is a good one, and it's very relevant to a lot of people. But the other one we talked about last week, and again, I feel I did not do a very good job last week in explaining the reason that I brought up the things that I did. Specifically, I had mentioned that I'm at the age now where my friends are starting to go through divorces and separations and having serious marital problems, or relationship problems in general. And specifically, one of the things that I've found interesting is reading about this, I guess, subculture called polyamory. And I'd read an article recently that said what monogamous couples can learn from polyamorous couples, that I thought was absolutely fascinating, because one of the absolute benchmarks of a polyamorous relationship. It's not that when you have what they, I mean, they hate the term open relationship, but when you have a relationship where you're not restricting your significant other from dating and loving other people, that doesn't mean that you're immune to jealousy and that there's things that won't bother you about it, or that you won't feel neglected or feel that this is causing a rift between you. The difference is these people are absolutely dedicated to saying that, to telling their significant others exactly how it makes them feel, and to discussing it like rational adults. And yeah, it's weird and awkward for the first handful of times, I'm sure, but it's amazing. The thought that I have in that is to see what the benefit of that kind of relationship could do to all of my friends that are going through these horrible issues with their marriages right now. And one of the best ones is jealousy. We talked about this a bit last week too, but how much damage does jealousy cause when it is just fear of what might be going on? Now, again, I'm not saying that that's all because the person who's feeling jealousy is at fault for it, but one particular example is one of the couples that I know. The wife is very jealous. She struggles with jealousy a lot, and not without reason. She's aware of some minor indiscretions in her husband's past. That, I mean, they were inappropriate behavior with other women that he had kept a secret from her and that she found out about. So she's earned this jealousy, or he's earned
I
this jealousy, I should say.
I would actually disagree. He's earned a boot, not jealousy. That there's two different things going on. Jealousy, as I would understand it, is a veiled form of insecurity, of one feeling inadequate, and feeling that the competition is more adequate than I am, and then seeing that the competition is someone that they have access to, fearing what this means in terms of abandonment. I think that's really where a lot of the jealousy comes from, which is a separate issue from the indiscretion of the partner. And I would think that it would be helpful to kind of separate those two issues, because I think that a self-respecting wife, and not to say that that this other woman isn't is being deliberately not self-respecting. There's ways in which she can't respect herself because she doesn't, and it's sad that she doesn't. But a person who definitely feels appropriate and adequate to life, if they are dealing with somebody whose indiscretions are violating them, is going to make it clear, we're not doing this, and if you're doing this, I'm not doing this. um, and so the jealousy, in a sense, there is, it's an attempt to, I think, disown my own sense of insecurity, as it may relate. I don't know. Does that make sense to you at all?
I think you're absolutely right that there's a certain, I mean, when you're not insecure about things, if you're not afraid of what might happen if this relationship ends, there's a touch of codependency that comes along with jealousy. Because if somebody's feeling sincerely jealous about something that they sincerely think is an issue, and they don't feel dependent upon this other person, or insecure about their ability to make it without that person, they're just going to cut the cord. It seems simple. Now, of course, love is a complicated thing, and I
Find
think that
a situation, but they're not going to sit there worrying about themselves. Because if you like yourself enough, you know that there will always be options for me if I choose to move in a different direction. Well, or if you're adequate to self, even being alone is better option, I suppose, than being betrayed. Um, and life is complex. I'm certainly describing it in a way that makes it overly simplistic. So I'm talking about kind of leaning in that sort of a direction. When it comes down to it, though, you've spent time, you've invested it with another person. I think there's a lot of wisdom to decide to, if possible, redeem a situation, if it can be.
and how can that be done is the thing that I'm getting at here. Is people make mistakes, and that happens. It's unfortunate, but but unfortunate things do happen. Nobody's perfect, and no situation is perfect. Um, there have been serious transgressions that have happened in every relationship, be it friend, family, or lover. And there's a choice or a crossroads that we come to with these: is this transgression going to be enough for me to walk away from it completely, or for me to want to make it work? And that there's, I guess, there's shades of gray in there. You can walk away for a while and always change your mind, but um, the way I look at these things is that if the moment the transgression or the situation is revealed, people
Hmm.
can agree to adopt absolute honesty. I think that is a massive solution to the problem. I mean, for instance, in this situation, the the husband is still very concerned about his privacy, and I think that privacy is something that is an intrinsic human right when it comes to um, the government or things like that. But a relationship is something that you enter into voluntarily. And part of that voluntary agreement is to sacrifice a bit of your privacy for the comfort
Hope,
of the other person
hope
or
not.
to walk away
Um,
from the relationship.
yeah,
Sorry,
I
what
do
was that?
think that there's a sense in which, in an intimate relationship, you invite someone else in to be they have carte blanche as a guest inside your boundaries. Uh, but they do have still have an obligation to behave like a guest inside those boundaries. Let me ask you an interesting question. How old are you, Greg?
28.
You're 28. I imagine. Let's assume that things are going really well and will continue to go really well, and let's look at the day that you finally reach 58. Do you think that you'll be a wiser, more mature person?
Well, I think that as a general rule, that's probably the case for the population. Of course, I am already as wise and mature as a human can be. So at this point, I'm just riding the plateau.
So this is all very hypothetical.
Right.
Anyway, now the question is: do you think that the increase of insight and wisdom and maturity will change your behavior?
Again, hypothetically, absolutely.
Sure. So that means that hypothetically, between 28 and 58, there are going to be things you're going to stop doing that, in a sense, you need to apologize for. You need to realize, oh, that's not good. That's not working. And there's a sense which, in a relationship, if you're going to mature in a relationship, this means that you're going to be open to another person who, in your own maturity, is going to see you decide that certain things you used to find acceptable to do are no longer, for various reasons, acceptable. And there's a sense in which the honesty that you create in being transparent during that process is part of how your partner actually bonds to you. They see you discover things you didn't understand, come to understand them, and then appropriately change your response. To me, that sort of honesty is part of what causes the years to be good to a marriage. And you can't accomplish that without there being a certain level of authenticity that you and your spouse are really looking for, and that both of you respect that process, you know?
I think you're absolutely right, and I will have to say, I mean, of course, I was being facetious there. That um, I have reached this plateau because there are things that I look back even a year ago that I did that I come to be, I guess, embarrassed of a little bit or seem silly. And the farther I go back along the line of my life, the more embarrassing things that I did or said or thought or felt um, become, and the more I can actually reach the point where I'm ashamed of things that I've done, and I truly regret things that I've done, said, felt, or thought, only because I've aged enough to understand a greater context than I did at the time. And I think that we do need to be aware that not everybody is capable at the moment to understand the entire context of a situation. And they may not ever reach that point, but the more they learn about it, the more they're going to understand.
I think it's also good to recognize that you use the word embarrass, that that there's this sense therein where part of the maturing process is learning to enjoy the embarrassment, to realize that the embarrassment is in some ways a badge of honor, indicating growth. You know, I look back at my younger attitudes and ways, and some of them I'm kind of, you know, red faced, embarrassed, or, you know, like, oh, I feel so foolish. I feel so exposed or something, you know, and but and at first that was the kind of thing like, oh, you know, it makes you uncomfortable. But I'm finding, and I'm 61 now, so I've come to the point where I find that those are really comforting moments now, to be embarrassed in that way.
Sorry, we are getting a comment here that I have to get clarification on.
There's probably a few people who are kind of shocked
Well,
to
I'll tell you,
discover
I can
that.
just say it outright. The person commenting here says, um, after watching the interview with Hovind, I researched him. This is after. So Bob is so ridiculously reasonable. He almost makes me feel guilty for the vitriol I spit towards religion. I like that. Um,
Almost.
and then it says, after watching the interview with Hovind, I researched him, which led me to his father's debunking of evolution, a more intellectually dishonest display I've never seen. I'm wondering here to the viewer and to you, Bob. He's not talking about your father, right? This is Eric Hovind's father,
I would
or was your
imagine.
father another evolution debunker? Because that would be interesting.
No, my father was quite a scientist. Uh, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted clarification. I'm like, that would be really funny, but okay. Moving on then. Um, we only have about 7 or 8 minutes left for the show, and I guess I did want to say one more thing since Eric was brought up um, on the level of honesty here. But before we get to that, I wanted to make one more, I guess, final punch on the intimate relationship side of it. Is that I think when we look at any relationship like that, there is the question of how committed we are going to be. Of course, you can always, always, always make the decision to end the relationship. You have no obligation um, to stay with a person beyond what you are willing to do. And that's something that we need to recognize. And we need to recognize that when we are not choosing to do that, we are choosing to stay with that person. This is a completely dichotomous choice here. There is no middle ground. And I think it's inappropriate when people treat it as though they can ride the middle ground. So when this friend found out that her husband had made a indiscretion, she had a choice. Was she willing to try to get past that and move on, or was she ready to end the relationship? And he had a choice. He had a choice the day he made that indiscretion as well. He tried to ride the line, um, and that was wrong. You can't do that. He, in the future, though, also made the choice to stay with her once the indiscretion came about. And one of the best ways to do that, obviously, she has a legitimate reason to be concerned for his fidelity, and his clinging to privacy in the fact that, say, he doesn't let her have a password to his Facebook account and hides posts from her or things that are restricted, or will not let her look in his phone. Doesn't want to tell her where he's going. Even if these are completely unrelated to anything, and it's just that he feels she's being intrusive, he is being abusive of that relationship because he's not being honest to her in the degree that she deserves it.
Yeah, I've heard people say that the best way to find out if your spouse is having an affair is to grab their smartphone in their presence and run into the bathroom and lock it. You'll find it. What are you doing here? But, no, I, there are other options than just those two. I think it's also important that we not only decide, if there's been an indiscretion. what does that indiscretion mean to me? What do I think it says about me? What do I think it says about our relationship? The truth is, my expectations might be immature and wrong, and there's a sense in which, not to say that it's therefore okay to betray someone, but it's not helpful to overcoming that betrayal if we perceive that betrayal in a way that is overly dramatic, uh, inappropriate, unfair to the other person, unfair to ourselves. It's a time to actually be not only honest about what has happened and honest about what it is I want to do about it, but honest about what is it I think this really means. You know, I there a lot of indiscretions happen just because people are plain immature. But some indiscretions happen because there's something going on in the relationship where someone's feeling cut off or abandoned, and then a moment happens where someone's reaching out to them, and they kind of reach back, and that can happen too. So it's that there are so many things that could be possibly going on that we need to be honest about. That it really broadens a variety of options that need to be considered. Best to get help if you can from somebody who has this ability and skill of guiding you through all of those various considerations and options.
Well, I don't have anything else to say on that. We're almost out of time here. So I wanted to lead into tonight's show a little bit more. I don't know exactly what you're planning on the Unconventional Pastor tonight, but I can tell you that from 8 to 10 tonight, Dr. Jones is planning a discussion of presuppositional apologetics. We've done this a bit outside of, or a bit on other shows. I will not be able to be a part of that one tonight, but I know we have Nick Albertini and Christian Luca will be joining Dr. Jones for that. Bob, will you be there?
Yes, I didn't know whether I would be able to, but I will be there. Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And by the way, we talked about honesty. Maybe next show, or if not next show, a show later, we could talk about, okay, how do we inspire honesty?
That would be a really good show. Why don't we plan on that for next week?
Very good.
And I wanted to say the way that I'm going to segue this in that situation is the discussion that they're going to have today will be, I believe, Dr. Jones presenting the arguments of presuppositional apologists. And this is one where I have a personal note to make about honesty. It has very little to do with what they're actually discussing on the show, and more to do with a DVD that was just released by, I forget the name of the production company, but Eric Hovind and Cy Ten Bruggencate were part of the production of this. And this DVD includes footage from the show that they were on with us and Dave Silverman. And I was not present for any agreements that were made about how to use the footage. I understand that they're not using it in a very or essentially that they didn't have a lot of integrity in how they dealt with the situation of confusion that came afterwards. I'm not going to make any direct accusations of impropriety, but I feel things could have been handled better. In the long run, though, I've had the opportunity to watch this film or this DVD,
I did.
specifically the parts that are related to us. And I wanted to talk about the other form of honesty and how it can be twisted and warped by people intentionally. When we talk about things in a way that we're trying to represent a case, we are granted by people who trust us or people who even like us a degree of leeway in that they will accept what we say without skepticism in many situations. And we need to be respectful of that situation. Otherwise, we can intentionally or unintentionally abuse the trust that these people have. And one of the things that I cannot stand is watching the clips from that DVD and seeing how things were edited and how a small portion of it was taken, and then 5 to 10 minutes of commentary were put about it, and ridicule and things to intentionally misrepresent the statements that one person or another person was making. And I feel that I have been personally wronged in this situation. as well as other people that were part of that night. And I think that it's absolutely inappropriate. And yes, this is me calling them out that Eric and Cy, if you'd like to discuss any of the points that you made on that show, I would be happy to invite Eric to come back on the show. I personally just don't like Cy anymore. I feel we've had more interactions, and I don't feel that he has enough integrity to handle a conversation like an adult in these situations. So he is not invited back on my show. But Eric, I would love to have you on the show, and we can discuss some of the things that you brought up in that DVD on level ground. I'd like to do a simple one-to-one conversation with you, Bob. If you wouldn't mind maybe moderating that one, or I would be happy to moderate a conversation between you and Eric as well, if you'd like that. But that's it. I just wanted to go out with a little challenge and a little commentary there. Is that if we're being honest, this show is filmed and broadcast live. If I sneeze, we don't have a chance to edit that out. When somebody takes post-production and sends it out in a way to dishonestly represent what happened, that is shameful. And I'm sorry, but I'm extremely disappointed. I, for one, thought this was a Christian organization. With that, this has been Inspiring Honesty. Stick around for the Unconventional Pastor up next, and The Place with Dr. Jones tonight at 8 o'clock. And tune in next week at 6 p.m. Central Time for another episode of Inspiring Honesty, where we are going to talk about the first half of our show, or our show's name.